Well, hey everyone, whether you're watching from 50 miles away or 500 miles away, we're just glad that you're joining us here at Flatirons Online this weekend. My name's Paul, I'm one of the pastors here on staff, and I would love it if you would just drop your name, where you're watching from, maybe what you're having for breakfast. We'd love to get to know you a little bit in the comments or the chat. Well, if you didn't know, we have 5 locations across the Denver area, and we would love it if you would join us for a weekend around here. We'd love to get you connected to the community of Flatiron, so be sure to join us one weekend here in the future. Now, if you want to stay connected, not just on the weekend, but throughout the week, we'd love for you to like and subscribe to our channel and share that with your friends and family. You never know what a message like today can do in the life of somebody you love. Well, we're going to get started here in just a moment. Thanks so much for joining us here at Flatirons Online.
All right, good morning, Flatirons. I hope you're enjoying this awesome weather. Yesterday, in my mind, was like perfect. It's the perfect Colorado day. It was beautiful. And it actually started to melt the snow in my north-facing backyard for the first time in 2 months. So I was able to kind of stand in the backyard and like see grass, and then also see about 2 months worth of dog poop that I've got to go clean up. So when I'm done doing this today, I'll be going home and I will be seeing if I can get my son to do that. Welcome back to this series that we've called Cause and Effect. If you've been coming kind of routinely, you know that for like the last couple of months, we've been talking about faith. That's a word that church people throw around, but half the time we don't even know what it means. And so we've been talking about like, what is faith? And then how can we go on like a faith journey like people talk about, both individually and then also together as a church. And this series continues our conversation about faith by leaning into cause and effect, meaning if we have faith, then how are we supposed to live now? Like, what is supposed to change? What's supposed to be the result or the effect of having faith? And throughout the series, we're doing that by looking at stories that Jesus told. And they're all stories that he told that point to the new and better life that is supposed to be the result, the effect of putting our faith and trust in him. And so we're gonna do that today. But before we jump into one of the stories that Jesus told, I want to tell you a story from my own life before we do that, all right? So it was 1996, and I was 11 years old in 1996. And if you're in my generation and you were a young boy in the mid-90s, it didn't matter where you lived, it didn't matter where you were from, you were a Chicago Bulls fan because you were a Michael Jordan fan, right? I fit into this generation of like, at that age, I'm mesmerized by this guy. This guy is a superhuman. I think he's here. I'm just mesmerized by Michael Jordan. I grew up playing basketball in my driveway, and I was Michael Jordan and the announcer and the buzzer and the fans, and I'm always winning the game at the last minute. I drew a picture of Michael Jordan and submitted it to Sports Illustrated for Kids. Did not publish my masterpiece, which I'm still bitter about. But one of my fondest memories of my childhood is 1996, and the Bulls are in the finals. Jordan is back from retirement. He gave up on dating baseball for a couple of years. He's back from retirement. They're in the finals, and my dad took our little TV and the antenna, and he set it up on a little table at the foot of my bed in my bedroom so that I could stay up late and watch the Bulls win the championship. And it's one of my fondest memories from being that age. Like, I thought I was an adult, basically. It's like I got a TV in my room, I'm staying up late, I'm eating peanut butter and jelly in my bed while I watch sports. Like, that's what an adult was in my mind. Honestly, during baseball season, that's kind of how I live as an adult, but it was so fun, and I got to watch them win the championship. And if you remember this and watch it, or you've seen the footage since, like, I was glued to the staticky image on our crappy little TV of Michael Jordan. Like, he's screaming and he's jumping like 8 feet in the air, like celebrating and beating his chest. And he grabs the basketball and he lays in fetal position with it in the middle of the court and like weeps. And then I watched him hoist the trophy, right? Like, while the crowd is drowning out the announcers. And I'm pretty sure if you watch real closely in the back, you could see Dennis Rodman getting a prison tattoo. It was awesome, okay? It was great. Okay, so that's a fond memory. Fast forward a few months from that moment, and I'm playing basketball in a city league team with my friends, okay, which is pretty hilarious because I am not physically designed for basketball. I'm like 5'7". I've never seen the top of a refrigerator. It's a mystery what goes on up there to me. But so I'm playing basketball with my buddies, and it's the end of the season, and we're playing our championship game, okay? Now, in reality, this was actually just the last game of the season for the worst teams in our random city league. They just called it a championship to make us feel cool, but you've got to understand that I didn't understand that, right? In my mind, this is the championship, right? Like, if we win this game, I'm going to be in the newspaper, right? Like, I'm thinking that Nike's gonna be knocking on my door and just giving me sponsorships. Like, I genuinely thought that this was the game to decide who was the best 11-year-old basketball team in the world. And so I play my heart out, right? I'm hustling, I'm throwing bows when no one's looking. I'm sprinting all the time, no matter what. And when the buzzer goes off, we actually end up winning this game, which results in one of the more embarrassing memories of my childhood, because we win the game, and my friends are kind of like high-fiving and packing their stuff up. They're ready for peanut butter crackers and orange slices and all that. Not me, because we just won the championship, right? And Michael Jordan is like winning the championship. It's freshly in my brain. And so the buzzer goes off, and by myself, I start jumping and shouting and screaming in the middle of the court. I take my jersey off. It's true. I'm spinning it around my head like a lasso. And then I take off towards my parents, who are packing their stuff up in the bleachers. And what happened next, I swear it happened in slow motion, because I'm sprinting toward my dad, and I jump up because he's gonna, catch me and spin me around in a circle. He's gonna, like carry me on his shoulders into the city square or whatever. And so it happens in slow motion. I see this like super confused look on my dad's face as I jump into the air. And as I'm soaring through space, hurtling towards my dad, he just steps aside. I go flying into the bleachers. And this is when I snap to reality, and I start to like come to my senses, and I realize people are staring at me like, what's wrong with this kid? None of my other teammates are celebrating as much as I am. And in fact, it wasn't until 15 minutes later, I'm sitting in this classroom that was a part of the school that we were playing at. My coach was passing out these championship trophies. It wasn't until then my friends explained to me, no, we are not the best basketball team in the world. And in fact, the championship game that we just won just means that we're the second worst team in our entire city league. And when I tell this story, like, so you know what I mean? Like, I still feel 11. Like, I feel it. I can feel and remember sitting on that ground with my back against the wall, staring at this championship trophy, and just feeling so discouraged and like so disappointed and so embarrassed, right? And I wasn't even just embarrassed about like my overreaction. I was also embarrassed about how much effort I put into the game. I remember sitting there just thinking, like, if someone told me, like, if I only knew that we were one of the worst teams in the league, like, I wouldn't have tried so hard. And here's why I tell that story. All right, even though that game was not the world championship of 11-year-old basketball, I was playing to win, like full effort at full steam, right? And it wasn't until I found out that we actually weren't a very good team and that this game actually wasn't a championship, it wasn't until then that I felt defeated. And so the only difference between me playing to win and me feeling defeated and discouraged was comparison. And what I mean by that is for the entire duration of this championship game, I'm not comparing myself to any other teams, right? And I didn't know. I didn't know we were at the bottom of the barrel of City League basketball. And so I played my heart out. I played to win. However, I believe that if I knew all that before the championship game, if I knew that basically every other team was better than us, I don't believe I would have played to win. I would not have given full effort at full steam. And even though that's just some like dumb, embarrassing story from my past, I think a lot of us are living this way, or at least I am. And what I mean is we've got these areas of our lives where we're not playing to win anymore. We're just coasting, right? Like our marriages or friendships or parenting or our finances, our discipline, our mental health, our careers, you name it. We're not playing to win anymore. We're just playing not to lose. And the reason that we've done that 9 times out of 10 is because of the comparison game. We looked at the people around us and we went, well, I'm never gonna be as good a dad as that guy, or as maybe a good a dad as I had, or as good a mom as her, and I'm never gonna run a business as successfully as that leader over there, and my marriage is never gonna be as fulfilling as it seems like my neighbor's marriage is, and so why try? We play the comparison game. We feel like we're not gonna be able to measure up to the people around us, and so we give up. And we're not playing to win anymore, we're just playing not to lose. What I mean by that is we say stuff like, as long as I don't get a divorce, or as long as my business doesn't file for bankruptcy, or as long as my kids are fed and kept alive until they're 18, like that's just gonna be good enough. That's gonna be all that I'm worth. And the story that I wanna look at today, the story that Jesus tells, it has to do with this mindset, the comparison game that leads to discouragement, that leads to playing not to lose. And it's a story, fair warning at the beginning of this thing, that Jesus designed to make us feel very uncomfortable. But if we can push through the uncomfort, there's some great truth at the end of it. And so let's dig in. All right, this story is in Matthew chapter 25. It starts in verse 14. Matthew is the very first book of your New Testament in case you've got a Bible and you wanna follow along. And the story that Jesus tells is a parable, which means it's an allegory, right? It's a fictional story that Jesus uses to point out spiritual truth. And the parable that he tells is actually a response to a question that his disciples asked earlier in the chapter. His disciples go, hey, Jesus, what is it gonna be like at the end of all time? And Jesus goes, well, it'll kind of be like this. And he tells this parable in order to kind of like mysteriously answer their question and also to teach us some truth. So here's how the story starts, Matthew chapter 25, verse 14. Jesus begins his story like this. He says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. Okay, so our story starts with a man, a business leader who's going on a journey, and before he does that, he entrusts his property to his servants. And right away, I wanna point out that the master did not say, hey, can you watch over my stuff while I'm gone? It's bigger than that. The original Greek word for entrusted is paradidomi, and it means he surrendered his property to his servants. So in other words, what just happened is this businessman says to his employees, what's mine is now yours. And I want you to run my business like I would for the time that I'm gone. It's a big deal. He didn't promote 3 people to be babysitters of his property. He promoted 3 men to be CEOs of his entire company. Okay? Keep going. To one servant, he gave 5 talents of money. To another servant, he gave 2 talents. And to another servant, he gave 1 talent of money, each according to his ability. And then he left. He went on his journey. Now, we're going to take a long time out here, okay? Because there's some stuff that we've got to understand now if the rest of this parable is going to make any sense to us. And the first thing we've got to understand is, what is a talent? Okay, well, a talent back in Jesus' day was a measuring unit used to weigh money. Okay, ancient Israel did not have a treasury department that printed cash that represented real value like we have in America. Instead, people had chunks of precious metals like gold and silver, and you had to weigh them to determine how valuable they were. And according to biblical and historical scholars, back in Jesus' day, if you were holding a talent of gold in your hands, you were holding, in modern day purchasing power, around $500,000 worth of gold, $500,000. And so in Jesus' story, the businessman who represents God is doing very well for himself. And he ends up entrusting and surrendering a lot to his servants who represent us. He gives one guy $2.5 million, he gives another guy $1 million, and he gives the third guy $500,000, all right? So a talent is about $500,000 of gold. But also, like all of Jesus's parables, the talents in the story represent something different. And in this story, the talents represent the gifts and abilities that you and I have been given. In fact, when we think of the word talent, that's what we think of, right? We say someone's talented, what we're saying is they have been gifted with certain unique and incredible abilities. That's because the English word talent originates in this parable. It's only in our vocabulary because people unanimously agree that the talents represent our gifts and our abilities. Okay, now, with that being said, for the rest of the time that we hear this story from Jesus, we're supposed to be picturing our gifts and abilities, the things that we're good at, and the people and the stuff that we've been responsible for, which causes me, at least, to already in the first 2 verses of this story see a few interesting and even uncomfortable things that Jesus is saying about our talents. First one is this: Jesus is saying our talents are given to us by God. And I know in America, we like to view ourselves as self-made, right? So it's like if I'm good at making money or playing sports or leading companies, that's because I earned it. Jesus is going, no, you were given that. God has surrendered this part of his character and his giftedness to you. Second thing I notice in the parable already is that Jesus is saying our talents are seen as incredibly valuable in the eyes of God. Jesus could have told this story any way he wanted to. He could have said that he handed each servant a few shekels just to test them and see like how they do with it. He handed them a couple $20 bills. He doesn't say that. He said the master entrusted all of his property, which was worth $4 million, to these 3 men. And so the talents that God has entrusted you and I are gifts that he considers incredibly valuable, and he expects us to treat them that way. So far, I don't think that probably makes any of us feel uncomfortable, but the third thing we've already learned from this parable makes me, at least, feel very uncomfortable. Because you gotta remember our story. One guy's given 5 talents, one guy's given 2, and one guy's given 1 talent, which means Jesus is saying God does not distribute talents equally. And again, we live in a culture that says you can be whatever you wanna be and do whatever you wanna do. If you just work hard enough or learn more or watch enough YouTube videos or master classes, then you can be the next president or the next Steven Spielberg or Babe Ruth or Steve Jobs or whatever. But according to Jesus' parable and other parts of the Bible, and if we're being honest, just day-to-day reality that we encounter, apparently that's not true. And it's not true because God does not distribute talents equally. He didn't create each and every individual human being to have unlimited capacity and capability and potential. And on top of that, he actually created some people to have more talents than other people. And if you're anything like me, you don't like to hear that. Our gut response to that, my gut response to that at least, is that is unfair. Well, you're telling me that like God designed some people to be literally more gifted and talented than other people. That's unfair. And if you're feeling like that right now, if you're being honest, like the Flatirons is the kind of church, you don't have to come in here and pretend like what do good Christians believe? That's what I believe too. You don't have to do that here. We can be honest with the truth that we're learning. And I believe that if you're being honest with this truth, it makes you feel gross. It feels unfair. And if you feel that way right now, that's perfect. Because that's the emotion that Jesus is trying to provoke in us when he tells this story. And he's trying to do that because he wants us to see ourselves in the servant who only got 1 talent. With all of that being said, we can cruise through our parable now. For the rest of this thing, we're supposed to be seeing ourselves in the servant who only got 1 talent. Back to our story, the master, the business leader, has entrusted his entire company to these 3 guys, these 3 employees, and then he leaves. He's gone on his journey. Next part of the story. The man who received the 5 talents, he went at once and he put that money to work and he gained 5 more. Same thing happened with the next guy. So also the one with the 2 talents, he went to work, gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent, he went off, he dug a hole in the ground, and he hid his master's money. All right, so the first 2 guys, they treat their talents with responsibility and they invest in them like they thought their master would, and they put their money to work and their return on their investment is each 100%. But the man with 1 talent did not treat it responsibly, did not invest in it like his master would. Instead, he went, dug a hole, put it in there, covered it up, and hid it. Next part of the story. After a long time, the master of those servants returned, and it's time to settle accounts with them. What'd you do with my money? The man who received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents, and see, look, I went and gained 5 more. And his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with just like a few things, and I'm gonna put you in charge of many more things. So come and share in your master's happiness. Then the man with the 2 talents, he also came. Master, he said, you've entrusted me with 2 talents, and see, look, I went and I gained 2 more. And the master replies, says the same thing. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things, and I'm gonna put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Master returns, time to settle accounts, and he's so happy with the first 2 guys because they were faithful with the talents that were entrusted to them. They put them to work. They invested in them in the same way that the master would have invested in them. But meanwhile, our guy, the servant who only got 1 talent, he's been standing by, and it's his turn next. And I'm imagining that like at this point, after watching these 2 guys go first, like he's sweating, he's red in the face because he knows that he wasn't responsible with his 1 talent. He didn't use it like his master would have. And so now it's his turn, and what does he start doing? He starts making excuses. Look at this. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I know you're a hard man, and you harvest where you've not sown, you gather where you've not scattered seed, and so I'm afraid of you. And so what I did is I went and I hid your talent in the ground. But see, look, I brought it back to you. I didn't lose it, I didn't spend it. Here's what belongs to you. This man makes excuses, and they are excuses that are based on some deeply rooted bitterness and resentment toward his master. He name calls. The servant says, yeah, you're a cold, hard, and severe man. He even brings into question whether or not this master is leading an ethical business to begin with. He goes, you harvest where you steal from other people's farms. Here's what's interesting. There is nothing in this story to suggest that the master is cold, hard, severe, or stealing from other people's farms. In fact, the story shows the exact opposite. This dude trusts his servants as if they are his own sons. He gives them opportunity. He surrenders his business into their hands. And then when he returns, he can't wait to celebrate the wisdom and hard work of the first 2 guys. He praises them. He encourages them. He doubles down by giving them even more responsibility, and he tells them to come and share in his happiness. Everything in this story points to this master basically being best boss ever. And so why is this 3rd servant so bitter? And this is where we get to the crux of the parable. This is the reason Jesus is telling the story in the first place. The man is bitter because, like we talked about a few minutes ago, he thinks his master is unfair. And he thinks his master is unfair because he's playing the comparison game. He's comparing himself to the other 2 servants. He's going, this guy over here, he got 2 talents. And Todd, of all people over here, got 5 talents, and I only got 1 talent. And so he's bitter, and he's trapped in self-pity, and the result, the effect, is that he did nothing with the talent that was entrusted to him. And I think we're smart enough to begin making connections here to our own real life, but just in case you feel lost, don't worry. Hang on to this idea. We're coming back to it in just a minute. Let me finish our story first. Okay, this servant, he makes excuses, and the master is not happy with that. He says this next, master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. Okay, so you knew something about me? You know that I harvest where I've not sown and I gather where I've not scattered seed? Well then, okay, if that were true, you could have at least put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I return, I would have received it back with interest. In other words, the master goes, you are wicked and you are lazy. And even if it was true that I'm a cold, hard, severe man who steals from other people's farms, even if that was true, you could have done the bare minimum. You didn't even do that. You went out of your way to do nothing with the talent that I gave you. And so the master takes action. And not only is his action scary, but it's just the end of our parable. The master commands, take that talent away from him, give it to the one who's got 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And then take this worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The master takes the talent away from the lazy servant. He goes and gives it to the responsible servant, and then he fires the lazy servant. And then we're told that this man is gonna have this moment where he comes to the realization of reality and realizes that I don't get to be a part of my master's business anymore. And I don't get to be around the master who was good enough to willingly entrust gifts to his servants so that they could join in his work and share in his happiness. And we're told that that realization is going to send this man into a place of darkness where he's weeping and he's grinding his teeth over it. The end. No happy ending to the end of this parable. It's a long parable, so after all of that, what does this have to teach us living in Colorado in 2023? Well, if the end of that story makes you uncomfortable, it's because it's supposed to. And that's because Jesus is trying to give us a stark warning. And because Jesus is good and he's truthful, he doesn't pull any punches. And the warning that he's giving us in this parable is this. He's going, do not play the comparison game and do not bury your talent. The point of Jesus' story isn't even the amount of talent that you got. Here's what I mean by that. If he had changed it a little bit and the first guy gets a fourth of talent and the second guy gets a half a talent and then the third guy, our guy, gets the same amount of talent, 1 talent, different story. This guy would have been humbled and honored. He would have taken his 1 talent seriously. He would have gone and invested in it like his master would have. And he would have gotten to hear those coveted words at the end of the story. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come and share in your master's happiness. The point of Jesus' story is not the amount of talent that you've been given, but instead your perspective of the talent that you've been given. He's telling us there might be some people out there who seem more gifted and talented than you. That's not your business. That's the business I run. Instead, your business is to cherish what you've been given, treat it responsibly, and invest in it like I would. But when you and I play the comparison game, and we start to look at what other people have that we don't, just like the servant, we become bitter and resentful. Sometimes we start to wonder if maybe something's even wrong with us, and then we give up. And just like the servant who buried his talent so that it wouldn't get lost, you and I simply end up playing not to lose. We stop playing to win. At least I'll speak for myself right now. I do this. I play the comparison game, and then I play not to win. I see this in my own life, okay? There are some areas of my life where I'm starting to get it figured out. I've stopped playing the comparison game, and the result is that I'm lighter and freer, and I'm able to approach my talents more responsibly. One example of that is literally what I'm doing right now. It's teaching. Okay, when I first started doing this, I used to play the comparison game all the time. I compared myself to every other teacher who's ever lived and existed. It was unhealthy, it was destructive, but now years later, with a lot of help from Jesus, I'm in this place where I understand that I have more teaching talent than some people, and I have much less teaching talent than other people, but I've got what I've been given, and I'm gonna use it. And so I know that there are better teachers out there, but I'm kind of in this healthy, free place right now where I'm going, for example, you know what? I'm not the next Jim Burgen, but that's okay, because you know why? Jim Burgen ain't the next Billy Graham or whoever, you know? And Billy Graham wasn't the next Jonathan Edwards, who wasn't the next John Calvin, who wasn't the next Apostle Paul, who wasn't the next Jesus Christ. If you play the comparison game, you always lose because you're always gonna be able to find someone with more talent and giftedness than you. And so with the teaching, I've stopped playing that game. One of the healthiest things I've ever done with my life. But then in other areas of my life, I'm at square one, right? And it's I'm the bitter, resentful, whiny servant from Jesus' story. For me, one of those examples is fatherhood, if I'm being totally honest with you. It's fatherhood. I've been given the gift, God has entrusted to me, he's surrendered to me 3 of his creations. Their names are Emery, Micah, and Chloe. And I want to invest in them wisely, but I find myself getting trapped in the comparison game. And maybe some of you know what this is like. It's I look at other fathers and I'm like, what is the point of even trying? I'm never gonna be this guy over here. I end up creating a picture in my head of every other dad that exists, and they're all superheroes. They're all the kinds of guys that when their kid is learning to ride a bike and the kid falls over, then this is the kind of dad, he walks up and he's like, son, let me wipe the tears from your face with these hands of mine that are calloused from building our own home. from the logs that I felled or whatever. You know, it's like you're falling off the bike reminds me of Plato's allegory of the cave and the kids eating it up or whatever. This is like my picture of how other dads are operating. Or I picture that like in every other household at dinner time, families are eating meals that they're like meat that their sons have hunted and vegetables that their daughters have gathered. And the dad is like at the head of the table beaming with pride, right? This is what I picture. Meanwhile, I'm out here trying to convince my kids that like goldfish can be just as delicious as Cheez-Its if you use your imagination. That's the level I'm at right now. So you get it, I'm playing the comparison game. And it's just a game I always lose, right? And the effect of it is I stop playing to win. Okay, so for me, for example, I know what I need to be doing. I know that I need to get one-on-one time with each one of them. I gotta go schedule fishing with Micah. I gotta schedule roller skating with Emery. She loves roller skating. I gotta go schedule a dinner date with Chloe, but then I get locked up. And in my head, I'm like, well, what if they don't actually wanna spend that time with me? And what if we have nothing to talk about? And my real fear is, what if I end up doing this and it only ends up proving that I'm no good at this dad thing? So then it's just easier to not do it. And I start playing not to lose. When I'm playing to win, I just take Emery on the date and I try my best to connect with her. And I'm sure there's other dads out there who are doing it better, but I'm doing the best that I can. That's when I'm playing to win. When I'm playing not to lose, these are the weeks where I let another lazy Saturday go by while my kids play video games all day long and I zone out on the couch because it's been a hard week and I know I'm not winning with them, but also I tell myself, I'm not losing either. I tell myself, there's worse dads out there, right? I'm not abusive and I haven't left them and they eat 3 meals a day. That's gotta amount to something, right? That is me burying my gifts and my talents. It's me playing not to lose. And I've already been told what happens when I play not to lose. The master in Jesus' story says, for everyone who has will be given more and he will have an abundance, but whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. In other words, if I treat my kids as valuable gifts that I'm responsible for loving like Jesus would love, I have a shot at abundance in those relationships with my kids. On the other hand, if I play the comparison game, I get trapped in my head, I start playing not to lose with my kids, those gifts could be taken from me. And what I mean is those relationships could disappear. They could end up resenting me. They could end up never wanting to talk to me again after they leave my house. See, the point of Jesus' story is all about cause and effect. If Jesus has given you a talent, an ability, or a gift, or a blessing, then you are responsible for treating it like Jesus would. If your gift is your kids, invest in them. If your gift is leadership, run the best possible company that you can. If your gift is empathy and compassion, seek out the people who are hurting around you and care for them. If your gift is making money, then show the world what generosity looks like for once. If Jesus has given you a talent, even if it's just one, you are responsible to invest in that talent like Jesus himself would. Jim says this all the time, and I love it. The question is not WWJD, like those bracelets that were popular for a while. What would Jesus do? That's not the question. The question is, if Jesus had your life with your job and your family and your friends and your bank account, your past, your baggage, your mental health, if Jesus had your life, what would he do with it? And I'll tell you what he would do if he had any of our lives. That man would play to win. And so let's stop the comparison game. Let's get out of our heads and let's play to win. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean, for example, God did not surrender part of his leadership chops to you. He did not entrust you with leadership chops so that you could run a mediocre company, be a selfish boss, and buy yourself a BMW. I'm sorry, that's not why he gave you leadership. Lead like Jesus leads. Display servant leadership. Be the best boss your employees have ever had. Think of your employees before you think of yourself. You might not be the next Steve Jobs out there, but who cares? Your employees are relying on your leadership to receive paychecks, to buy food and clothes and braces. So get out of your head and get back in the game and play to win. For the dads out there, you and I, we might not be the next super dad. We might not write the book on fatherhood. Right? We might not be Danny Tanner from Full House or whatever, but our kids, you and I, are all they got. And they deserve more. They deserve more than dads who are just doing the bare minimum and blaming it on a long week at work. I am not judging you. I'm preaching to myself right now. Instead, they deserve dads who stopped playing the comparison game and started playing to win. They deserve to see the fatherhood of God through our parenting. So, man, get back in the game. Play to win. For the moms out there, you might not be the next social media influencer with a tip a day on how to fold the perfect cloth diaper or make a Michelin star quality lasagna from scratch or whatever. You know, like make a little origami swan to put in your kid's lunchbox. But those kids, they call you mom, and you're all they got. And they deserve more than a mom who's disengaged and distant and blames it on being exhausted. Instead, they deserve moms who stopped playing the comparison game and they started playing to win. They deserve to see the nurturing compassion and leadership of our God through your parenting. So get out of your head, get back in the game, play to win. How do we do that? Well, here's the crazy thing about a parable like this one, and Jesus has lots of these kinds of parables. It's so in your face, and it's so convicting, and it's so challenging that you don't need anyone else to tell you what to do. Because the truth is, if any of this is hitting home for you, you already know what you gotta do. You know the conversation that you need to go home and have with your kids or with your wife. You know the appointment you need to schedule with your doctor to get your mental health under control. You know the change you need to make to your employee handbook. You already know. You don't need me to tell you. The challenge from me and the challenge from Jesus' parable is stop making excuses and go and do it. For me, my thing is I have to schedule one-on-one time with all three of my kids, and I've got to schedule a monthly date with my wife, Allie, and I commit to doing that today before the sun goes down. That's my thing. I don't know what your thing is. I'm not your Holy Spirit, okay? But you know what your thing is. What is one area of your life where you know you're coasting and you're just playing not to lose? And what is one thing that you know you need to change in that area? The challenge is simply stop making excuses, go and do it, and see what Jesus does with it. The challenge from Jesus' parable is play to win. Stop playing the comparison game and play to win. Now, before I pray and we sing one more song and then we get out of here, I want to leave on a note of encouragement because I'm with you. When I read this parable, it is in your face and it's convicting and it's challenging, but there's also like some encouragement from Jesus tucked into this parable, and if you blink, you'll miss it. It happened at the very beginning of the story where Jesus said that God has surrendered his own gifts and abilities to us, his servants. And Jesus said that he gave each one of our own individual, unique abilities and talents. He gave us those, each according to his ability. What does that mean? It means before you and I can play to win, we first have to pause and remember that God gave us our gifts, our responsibilities, our blessings, our abilities, each according to our capabilities. In other words, he didn't give us anything that we can't handle. And it means that you have the marriage that you have because Jesus knows that with him, you're capable of faithfully leading it. Okay, yes, even in the midst of the arguing and the communication stuff that you got to get figured out and you got to work on, and in the midst of the highs and the lows, in the midst of the date nights and also the boring, lazy nights where you're just watching Netflix or whatever, he says that you are capable with him of faithfully leading the gift that he's given you. And it means that you have the kids that you have because he's saying, with me, you are capable of faithfully raising them. Yes, even in the midst of the boring, mundane, I'm just wiping butts again kind of days, even in the midst of adolescence and rebellion, even in the midst for some of us of physical and mental disabilities, God is saying, I gave this to you because you are capable of faithfully raising these kids with me. And it means that your life, specifically your life, with your money and your job and your family and your friends, even including your baggage and your mental health, your strengths and your weaknesses, you have your life because God knows that with him, you are capable of faithfully carrying that weight. And it means that you don't have anything that you have, both the good and the bad, the blessings and the baggage, the joy and the pain. God wouldn't have let you carry any of that if he didn't believe that there was gonna be one day, this amazing moment where you and him are gonna sit down together face to face, and he's finally gonna get to say the words to you that he's been eagerly awaiting to say to you for your entire life. He's gonna sit down with you and go, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been so faithful with what I've given you. And so now it is time to come and share in your master's happiness. God, this is a heavy and convicting and challenging story that you told. And even what I just said, like this idea that you haven't given us anything that we can't handle. Like for some of us in the room, we're encouraged by that. That's what we needed to hear today, right? It's like, we feel just like, all right, we're sitting up taller and our heads are held high. I can carry this. With God, I can carry this. We feel encouraged. There's others of us, we're just going through a really rough time and we're just sitting here going like, well, I don't think I can carry it. So why'd you give it to me? Why'd you give that thing to me? I can't carry it. God, for the people who are encouraged, feel that encouragement. But then for the people who are sitting here going like, not true, I can't carry it. God, please do what I can't do. No song can do, no sermon can do this, no friend can do this. Do what only you can do. Speak even just a little bit of peace into those people's hearts, just enough to get through at least one more week. God, even though this is a convicting and a challenging truth, I'm thankful for it. God, thank you for being the kind of God who willingly surrenders beautiful parts of your character and your giftedness to us, not to run a test, not to challenge us to see how we do with it, but instead you're just a good master and you want us to enjoy in your work and you want us to join you in your work and you want us to like share in your happiness. So even though it's a challenging, convicting truth, God, I'm still thankful for it. Thank you for what you've given us. Thank you for our talents and our gifts and our marriages and our kids and our jobs and our careers and our families. God, thank you for all those things. Please help us to invest in them like you would. And I pray all of this in your son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you so much for watching Flatirons Church online. We are creating new content and streaming every Sunday. So if you want to stay connected with us, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And hey, if you believe in what God's doing here, you want to help us impact the world, go ahead and hit the Give Now button, and you will help us reach people in a lost and broken world. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you right here next weekend.